What if the stage of healing we're at right now isn't about discovering who we are and uncovering our core issues and all that jazz, but actually it's learning how to value ourselves? That's actually what I think we're going through right now with the move from Chiron, who's been resident in the sign of Aries since 2018. He's moving into Taurus tomorrow on the 19th of June, 2026. In this short recording, I'm going to explore Chiron's journey through Aries so that we know how to graduate from the lessons that he's given us. I always think that when we are at a threshold, and we are right now, and we're in a doorway from one stage of life to another, it deserves some honoring. It deserves some summing up of the collective and also the individual experience we've been through. And that's what I'm going to be doing here with this recording. So if you're new to my work, my name's Louisa. Welcome to the Feel Good Astrology channel. This is where I share all of my slightly hippie, slightly stay at home mum astrologer thoughts. And really, I like to talk about the planetary influences, the mythology, the pop psychology, maybe some people might accuse me of. I like to share them in such a way that we can unpack our experiences and make sense of our lives, that we can come home to ourselves. To me, that's one of the greatest gifts that we can explore with astrology. So we're really exploring the threshold, what it means to have gone through the journey in the sign of Aries since 2018, all those different experiences you've gone through. If you think about how our world has changed in that time, it's pretty significant. It's a really significant chunk of time that we've just been through. And of course, once we've understood what we've learned, we can unpack actually the strengths that we've now got, like these new techniques we've got, these new understandings about ourselves. And I think armed with those, we can really head into quite a new and stabilizing Chiron future. So hope you're with me on this. Let me add some context. We're going to be looking at the core question that Chiron helps us to understand about ourselves and some of the major themes that have happened around the world during this time. I also want to bring up the idea that every planet and every energy that we can look at in our birth charts has a distortion. It also has an integration. It also has a medicine. And so I want to have a look at the distortion, the integration, and also the medicine of Chiron in Aries before we come to that sort of final part of the threshold, like our graduation through this particular era, leaving us fresh and ready to go into the sign of Chiron in Taurus. Now, I do want to just say, even though Chiron's moving into Taurus tomorrow on the 19th of June 2026, he's only dipping his toe in. He's giving us a sort of future taste. It's a preview. He's going to be there for 3 months. And then on September the 18th, he's going back into the sign of Aries, where he's going to be until April the 14th, 2027. So we're at a real crossing point right now. And I do think that's going to bring about quite a few different healing styles during this time. And I think it could actually open up quite a vulnerable space and also a very dynamic space for us to do any kind of work that we're doing on ourselves right now. So I think the core question that comes up with Chiron and Aries is, who am I? Aries is a sign associated with our identity. And also, I always think of Aries as being an arrival point. This is showing our birthing, where we come from the mystery. We've come from our mother's wombs, or we've come from space. I don't know what your belief system is, but we have arrived in our life. And I think Aries really represents a birthing point where we are forming our identity and coming to understand ourselves. If there was a wound associated with Aries, it would be, who am I? What is my identity? And I think, can I be me without losing myself? I think the sign of Aries is very much about being the individual. And yet, if the individual is going to get wounded from Chiron being in his sign, the place where Chiron is finding that wound is in the individuality, where it's maybe not safe to be yourself, where you might fear losing yourself, where you don't know how to express yourself. So this really is all about how you are perceived, how you're understanding yourself. And I think it's also asking underlying questions such as, am I okay? And also, I think it's creating a deeper understanding of whether we are so sure of ourselves that we don't need permission for things, that we're not looking for approval. But for most of us during this who am I stage and asking these questions of am I okay, we come under the we come under the influence of social persuasion and approval. If you think that Aries is really like a birthing point, then I also think Aries is very much like the infancy of man. I'm not to say that if you're an Aries that you're not a grown up. I'm not saying that at all. But I like to think about all the different signs of the zodiac really telling a story about the ascension of man or the evolution of man, the growth of man from baby right the way through to the end of days and then into our next life. So I really think the zodiac tells us a story. So if we're thinking that this is very much about the birth and the new identity, this newly discovered identity, I think babies are absolutely influenced by what's around them and they need to learn their boundaries quite quickly. So they start to learn that they have a distinct space themselves. It takes babies a long time to learn that. I've got I've got three children, and I've noticed with all three of my children when they were small, there was a time before they really knew they were distinct and individual. There's a moment where they notice their hands and their feet and they really fully realize that there's a separation between me and them. And that doesn't come instantly at birth. It's an evolving thing that they are separate, that they are a separate entity, a separate person, a separate human. So these are core questions that we can really feel wounded by. And if you cast your mind back to the beginning of this ingress, I think it was around, was it April? Yeah, April the 17th, 2018, when Chiron went into the sign of Aries. What was going on for you in those early spring, if you're in the northern hemisphere, or early autumn, if you're in the southern hemisphere? What was going on for you in those early seasonal times in 2018 and into 2019? How were you thinking about yourself? Have you battled to feel okay or to know where you begin and where you end, where your boundaries are? So, some of the major themes that I think have come up during this time between 2018 right the way through to now, I would say there have been a lot of really strong events. The most notable one I would say would be the COVID phenomenon and the public health interventions. All the vaccine debates really brought into question our belief systems, individual rights versus collective responsibility. I think that came up as a huge theme for people during this time. Freedom of speech versus censorship concerns. I think that really ties in with the idea of social persuasion. I think lots of people recognize themselves through making decisions that had good feedback. If you think of small children, they often learn how to norm quite quickly. Even though Aries isn't necessarily a sign that is about norming, I think that early stage in our development, we learn how the rest of our pack are, or our family are, or our community are. We learn all of those communications really early on. So it's interesting, this freedom of speech and censorship concerns, I think, have really come up during this time as well. Migration and displacement, and also remigration. All of these themes have been really strong during this period of time of Chiron in Aries. Also, gender, sexual identity conversations have been going on, and also body autonomy, the Me Too movement, the idea of my body, my choice. It's huge. It's been really big as a theme during this time. And of course, that also ties in the idea of birthing as well. And also, no means no. This is about us getting comfortable to assert where our boundaries are and where they're not, and how we feel when something comes across our boundary. In many respects, when our governments were telling us how we needed to keep ourselves and others safe, there was an imposition on our behaviors. And for some people, that just absolutely felt right. And that would be going with the collective responsibility idea. And yet, for other people, I'm sure it brought up some really big feelings of being imposed upon or having their boundaries broken. And I think that can also bring up trust issues, given that Chiron shows our wounds and our vulnerability. And if ever we've been let down by somebody in authority, we might replicate our mistrust and difficult feelings with other authority systems that appear to control us. So there's been also abuse scandals, institutional failures across the board, across the world. Like I mentioned, that distrust of governments, media, authority structures. And so I just think all of these things have really been key during this Chiron and Aries time. And you could be completely forgiven for feeling a little bit lost in there, because we've all got really quite swept up in a fervor and a fever pitch of energies pushing us one way and the other. The rise of strong personal identities and tribal affiliations I've absolutely seen come, where people are really quite polar, which is interesting because Aries is such a strong sign and is so determined and it has its own way. And it's very happy to go alone as well. Aries is a sign where we really develop our own sense of self. And yet during this time, it's felt that we have to be safe. And so I think people have gathered together and grouped together and then had the same kind of fervor that Chiron in Aries has, or Aries has anyway. And so that's been a really major theme, this kind of separation and almost going into battle. Mars is the ruler of Aries, and Mars definitely has some influence over Aries. And when Chiron is in Mars's sign, Mars does have some influence over Chiron. And Chiron, in many ways, has helped us go into battle, but also to experience the wounds of going into battle. Yeah, I think it's been pretty significant time. And, many people were told that the other was to blame. One of the things I definitely have observed with Chiron and Aries, and I'm born in that generation, by the way, the Chiron and Aries generation, when we experience hurt and when we experience vulnerability, it's much easier to be able to see that something must have been at the cause of it. Very much cause and effect is, and it's quite a simplistic way of looking at things. Interestingly, I think we've really been in a time where there were two presented options to us rather than multiple. And like when we see that there's two options, we're often comparing them. There's a strong comparison, and we think this is right and that's wrong, that's up, that's down, that's black, that's white. And so if we're also with Chiron and Aries looking for somebody to blame, if we're on one side, then the other side by default looks like the wrong side. Yeah, this I think has been a time where we might have felt shut down. And of course, if you're wondering who you are and wondering how you can be yourself and be safe to be yourself without losing yourself and without losing your power, feeling like you might be shut down or separated or having your voice controlled, that could be quite scary, especially if any of you or if you identify with bullying in your childhood or any kind of imposition where you felt powerless and you've not been able to advocate for yourself, then that would have absolutely brought up that Chiron and Aries theme fresh into your life, fresh into your experience for you to re-experience it. I think wherever Chiron is going, he's encouraging us to look at what's residual in our index of hurt. Like if we had the Akashic records in our head and we could literally look at every single hurt that had ever come across, ever crossed our path, Chiron, there would be a whole list of things from your first cut where maybe your mum didn't come and help you straight away, or there's going to be lots of different things that would have been significant to your 2-year-old self and not so significant to your 13-year-old self. But wherever Chiron is touching in your chart, he's exerting his influence and reminding you of where you're a bit on the vulnerable side. Now, of course, if you think about small children, and Aries is the first sign, it's very childlike in its very sort of direct manners, like it wants to do its own thing, and the Aries energy acts first and seeks forgiveness a little bit later. It doesn't have very good impulse control, you could say. The energy, like that childlike energy, might sometimes need someone to advocate for us, and we might be seeking somebody to stand up for us, against the bullies. And so like that sort of childlike wonder is looking like, who is standing for us? Where are we protected right now? And especially if we've had our physical or our national boundaries explored and it's felt uncomfortable, you might also be thinking, okay, who's going to stand up for us? Or if you If you think that you're standing with the people around you, you might be thinking, who's going to stand up for all of us? So there's been these very strong themes coming out. It's been, it has caused a lot of separation where someone's truth is someone else's hate and vice versa. I've really seen almost like mirroring views that it's been really fascinating to observe, but it's also a time when I felt very riled up and separated and washed around in all of the different energies. So it's a very strong dynamic. And of course, because Aries is a cardinal sign, everything that's getting stirred up has a purpose. It's moving in a particular direction. If we were to look at the distortion that comes up with Chiron in Aries, this is really like the distortion is where something's unconscious. It's where we're not necessarily aware that something's not quite right. Maybe we don't get a chance to consciously go, oh, hang on, something's not quite right here. I'm just going to stop myself. We go straight into the offense. We go straight into the upset. And so I think that's why there's been so much anger and blame and name calling. There's been a lot of victimhood, and we've been able to name it because Aries really wants to see things very directly and interact with things very directly. So, victimhood always has an aggressor and a victim. So again, there's two parties. It's very defensive, and it's brought up a lot of division and tribalism. The me versus them is really strong. And that's just showing that there's some, it's not to say if you found yourself in this place that you're a bad person or you've got a Chiron wound that is much stronger than you. It's more stronger than anything you can actually deal with. What really is going on here is just that there's something very unconscious that's working behind the scenes that you can't quite see. And I think pretty much everyone on this planet will have been in that distorted state at some point over the last 6, 7, 8 years. Permanent outrage. This has been a really tiring time, especially if you felt like your emotions have gone from pillar to post. It's very exhausting finding your way. And if you remember, that core question that we're considering is, who am I? And how can I be me without losing myself? Of course, if there's lots of persuasion and things to get angry about, you could lose yourself with all that noise. So I do think a lot of us have been wearing identity as armor and fighting for the sake of fighting because something feels off, but it's unconscious. We can't quite grapple with it. We just know something just doesn't feel right. Now, the integration is the awareness that has developed over this time, this period of time. And for me, I've noticed that a lot of that awareness has really come in over the last few years, but in particular in this last 6 months. And if I was to be even more honest than that, just in this last few weeks. And that's not surprising because as a planet or a heavenly body finishes a transit through a sign, I think as it comes into those last degrees, it starts to really think, okay, what have I left unsaid? What's left undone? Let's get this finished. Let's get this completed. A bit like if you're moving house and you're going to be moving to a new address, you finish everything up. If you're finishing up at a job, you have to make sure you get everything completed. And so I think in the last 6 months in particular, all of our healing work that where we've actually felt very defensive and where we felt in outrage and where we felt that we've had to wear our identity as an armor, the lessons have been coming thick and fast. And so I think a lot of awareness has developed in my life really since 2026. And from conversations I have with friends and clients, I see that mirrored around. What's coming up with this integration stage is a lot more self-responsibility. So if you're really feeling, yeah, I've got loads of that, that's great. You've really already started to integrate the learning of Chiron in Aries. Maybe you were born like that as well. I do think there are lots of people who are very responsible from word go. There's a lot of discernment. There's a lot more authenticity, clearer boundaries. So you really know, you're knowing yourself already. So again, if we go back to that core question, who am I? Can I be me without losing myself? When we're integrated, we know our boundaries. So we don't have to fight for them. We don't have to defend them. We know them. We don't need someone to tell us them because we know them. If someone is fighting us or with their words and stuff, we might just step away because it's not important. We don't need to defend it. We clearly know who we are. But it does show that we've got courage and we trust ourselves and we can be really honest with our questioning. We can see other people's perspectives and we can listen and see to things without flying off. So it puts us into a place of sovereignty and a lot more conscious choice, which I think is obviously great because it gives us options. It gives us a little bit of space. And then as we go even further into this, I think there's a medicine associated with Chiron in Aries, which is really, I know who I am. I really know who I am. And I don't need permission to exist. This existence, this is about our birthing. With Chiron in Aries, there could be this wound that you never had the right to exist. And I know I've seen themes like that coming up over the last few years. We've been talking about somebody's right to safety, people's right to nourishment, people's right to exist, people's rights not to exist as well. So there's been a lot here about permission to be. And there's been a lot of people that might disagree with us on this journey as well. So experts, authorities, friends, family, in particular around the COVID times, there have been lots of different people disagreeing and lots of fact checkers and Snopes and things like that coming out to really put people in their place. A lot of social pressure's been going on. I put that down to Pluto in Aquarius. This has been a hard time to find yourself, but you can see from this that actually it's been almost like a very well orchestrated plan. Through these last 6 years, or 8 years in its total, we've really got a sense of what we've learned. We should have by now got a really clear sense of who we are from the battles that we've been on, whether they've been emotional, whether they've been physical, spiritual, political, however we have felt like we've been at battle, and however we've needed to discover ourselves. Chiron in Aries will have given us lots and lots of opportunities to do that. So right now we're at this kind of threshold between Aries and Taurus, and I just wanted to bring in this idea of the distinction between the two. So whereas Aries is asking, who am I? Taurus is asking, am I enough? Whereas Aries is talking about the permission to exist, Taurus is talking about the permission to receive. The Taurus energy that we're coming into, the Chiron in Taurus, is very soft by comparison, but it's strong. When I say it's soft and gentle, that doesn't mean to say it's weak. It's absolutely not. And if we were to think about Aries and then into Taurus, Aries is that birthing energy. It's raw. It needs to have its needs met. If you think of a baby, a small baby, it cries if it's hungry, if it's cold, if it's wet, if it needs comfort. It will scream and shout until it gets its attention. And babies need to do that. That's part of the design. The Taurus stage, if we were to take the whole of the zodiac to represent the whole journey of our being and our belonging here on earth, the Taurus side is when we're coming into our own personality. We're coming into this sense of trust. Like we know who we are, and we know who our carers are, and we know roughly when we're going to get fed or looked after. And so the Taurus lesson, as I see it, is learning to receive, learning to trust, learning to recognize that life has got our back. And so Chiron here is going to be bringing in some very strong wounds about our deservability and our ability to receive. Hence why I say Aries is permission to exist and Taurus is permission to receive. So we've been becoming ourselves, and Taurus is just teaching us to be ourselves. We've been discovering who we are, but we're now discovering how to be comfortable being ourselves. So this is a lot more about acceptance and allowance and cherishing rather than earning your right to be here and finding yourself. This is going to be a lot easier for us, I think, as a group of people on planet Earth right now. If we were to graduate from this energy as Chiron comes out of the sign of Aries, how do we know that we've really grasped that message? It would be, can you still hear yourself even if everyone around you disagrees? Can you still stand to be yourself even if you know that people don't approve of you? Can you stand in your own right? Can you stand for what you believe in, even against masses of social pressure? Because if you do, then you've really got a good sense of yourself and also a really good sense of your self-trust. And I would also say that means that you've already dealt with bullies. And actually, in terms of bullies, you've got the external bullies, but you've also got your inner bully, which can come up absolutely with Chiron. Now, Taurus, when we go on this Chiron in Taurus journey very shortly, it's asking us, How do we value ourselves even if everyone disagrees? That's a whole different kettle of fish that we're going to come to terms with and learn over the next few years. The other thing that I think is really quite important is we'll be getting even deeper into our body. We'll be learning a lot more about touch and our five senses. The sign of Taurus absolutely is about comfort at a really foundational level. Again, I draw your attention to a baby that has already learnt the rules. It knows it's going to be looked after. That baby can be comfortable. There's some residual knowledge that the comfort is there. It knows it can receive and is quite delighted by how this works. So it's really in its body. It really knows who it is. It understands its instincts. It's okay to signal to a parent, look, I need something. It doesn't have to go into big screeches, big cries. It can find a way to communicate without losing itself. So it knows its instincts before it gets chronic. It can signal ahead of time. It's really zoned in on its own instincts and sensations in its body. It also feels gut feelings. The sign of Taurus is actually very intuitive. It understands the natural rhythms too, the natural rhythms of life. Again, if I go back to babies, it can take them a while to get into their natural rhythm. And yet an older baby understands when feeding time is or when pooping time is. There is a balance that they come into. So I hope that's given you a sense of the threshold that we're in right now in between Chiron in Aries and Chiron in Taurus. And if you were to apply that to your life right now and ask yourself how well you've done, I think if you're ready to receive comfort and you're ready to allow for things now, if you're ready to rest, if you're done with fighting, you might have found in recent months that the fight has just gone from you. You've started to calm down. You started to slow down. You're all ready for the Chiron in Taurus era, which is fast approaching. I hope you found this helpful so far. I hope you can see how you've developed and grown during this time, because I think that's really going to determine how you go through this threshold. Remember, we are just at the border. We're at the edge between Aries and Taurus right now. Chiron is going in for 3 months before he goes back into Aries. So we still do have this Chiron in Aries journey, but I don't think we have to wait for another 9 months before we fully know that we've completed that journey. I actually think we can work with the planets. We can work with the heavenly bodies ahead of time. So good luck with that. I hope that was helpful, and I hope to connect in again with you real soon. Lots of love.